time, because on that software it's probably not yet in use by everyone, and therefore kind of going a little more into details on that software. Of course, whenever you have questions, feel free to either interrupt or wait until the end of the section, and then I will pause for your questions before we will move to the next topic. Let me move onwards with the presentation. So this is really the training about the Lightspex Pro instrument. So basically, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with kind of the rationale and the reason why X-Rite switched to a new radiometer, and that is really mainly related to the fact that the old Lightspex instrument was really discontinued in manufacturing for quite some years now. We officially as well discontinued the service for the product years ago, but we kind of kept it alive as a service tool for our X-Rite service organization, but as well for the global certified service partners. But what happened in the last couple of years is that, of course, we got to know that more and more users got troubles with the instrument because it kind of was no longer really reliable. And then, of course, what we faced as well is we faced some parts that became obsolete. So our ability to repair those old Lightspex instruments became worse and worse. And that's why we kind of had to come up with a replacement solution. And that's kind of how that project evolved, which I was leading here, to find a replacement device and kind of get our softwares updated in a way that this new device is supported in our service software tools. So along with the toolkit you got, there is a quick start guide included, and I would like to spend kind of a couple of minutes on that topic, and that is really the document you should find in your toolkit. And in this document there is basically a little information about what's included in the toolkit. So there isn't really that much required. It's basically a safe transport case. It's the radiometer itself, and that one has actually a protection cover attached to its diffuser head. So that is really no longer a dark calibration cap as it was on the old Lightspex instrument. So on the Lightspex Pro, that is really just a protection cover for the diffuser head itself, and to ensure that it's not discoloring over time. So therefore, this protection cap, protection cover should always kind of get attached to the diffuser head whenever the device is not in actual use. Whenever you are using it, you can simply remove it, and you don't have to attach it for any sort of dark calibration. So the method that is used on the Lightspex Pro is really an internal shutter mechanism that will automatically block light from entering to the sensor inside the instrument whenever a dark calibration is required. So there is no longer a manual dark calibration required. So that's always triggered directly by the software, and it's kind of done that fast that you hardly notice that it actually did a dark calibration. The only thing that helps you to identify that it was actually done is you hear a little clicking noise whenever the instrument opens or closes the shutter. But besides that, there is not really a delay on the whole process. It is really done quite fast and almost not noticeable by the user. What you have included as well in the toolkit is, of course, the USB cable to connect it to your computer. But then along with it, what we decided on the new solution is there will be or there is, in fact, when you looked at the case, there is a memory stick included, and we intended to put the calibration data file for the instrument as well as the certificate for the Lightspex Pro instrument on that memory stick, so that you should have everything without kind of, asking us for providing you the calibration file as it happened in the past on the old Lightspex instrument. So basically, whenever you are going to return your Lightspex Pro instrument back to us in future for recalibration, ensure that you include that memory stick, and then once you get the device back from us after recalibration, you should directly have everything you needed with that on that memory stick. I see there's somebody else joining, so let me quickly admit. Okay, then along with that, you should have received as well a black curtain. So that black curtain is really what we use to shield ambient light from entering the light booth when we calibrate it. And then there is as well on the quick start guide you got, there is a instruction on how to handle the instrument. So of course we are talking here about a sensitive measurement device, and of course we ask you to handle it with care. We ask you to ensure that you operate it within the specified temperature and humidity range, which are kind of written here in the quick start guide. But of course as well, you should avoid that you drop the instrument, expose it to rain, liquids, moisture, anything like that. And of course, do not try to disassemble the instrument. Do not try to remove the diffuser head, because all that's happening is that you probably damage the instrument, or at least you affect the performance and the calibration we did to the actual instrument. Kind of an additional information you have as well is at the bottom of the quick start guide. So we're talking about what needs to happen when the instrument is requiring recalibration. So in that case, it's kind of the similar process as we have with the old Lightspex instrument. So you would simply request an RMA, in your case, from the Hong Kong service department, and then the instrument would get returned via Hong Kong service quarters in the US, where we do recalibrate the instrument, create a new calibration file and a new instrument certificate, and then that one would be returned via the Hong Kong service department back to you. And on that memory stick, you would find then the new calibration file and the new calibration certificate. So one big difference for you is that because the new instrument is way more stable than the old one, that's why we were able to extend the recalibration interval from 6 to 12 months. So at the new instrument, it really only requires to get returned back to us on an annual basis and no longer kind of twice a year. We are still not sure whether we can possibly extend that interval in the future, maybe to 18 months or so, and that really depends on how well the instruments that we got back after a year still perform. We're still confident that 1 year is more kind of on the safe side. We're confident that we can probably go to a larger interval, but we would like to look at the data first before we make any changes to that currently annual recalibration of the Lightspex Pro instrument. So that's kind of the information you find on the quick start guide included in the toolkit. That's kind of one of the slides on my presentation here. And now I would like to kind of move on with the SPL-QC service software that you will get access to. So of course, I believe all of you are actually using the SPL-QC service software. However, there is now a new version, and that new version, of course, supports the Lightspex Pro instrument. But of course, that were not the only changes we did. As we worked on the software, we made additional changes, and that's kind of what I would like to outline in a couple of PowerPoint slides before we then look at the changes directly mostly in the service software. And once we have covered the SPLQC service software, we would then move to the second service software, the LightView 2 software you will get as part of the toolkit. And I will introduce that software just in the next 45 minutes. So basically, for you, these are kind of the changes we did on the SPLQC service software. I think most interesting for those who were using the software before. And if you look from the bottom on release 5.9 here, this is really kind of the biggest changes we did. All the newer versions then are really just kind of minor changes, as you can see, but kind of talking a little bit on the changes we did on the release 5.9. So of course, biggest change was the support of the new Lightspex Pro measurement device. So that is now fully supported in a software. What we did as well is, and that was kind of based on feedback we got from actual users. So that can be, and that is mainly users of certified service partners. So some of them, they found it kind of inconvenient because the software kind of asks you to upload your test records on a regular interval, and that is basically required every 3 weeks. So if you were if you have forgotten to actually do that data upload and you went to a customer without doing any preparation work, you probably ended up in the situation where you were directly at the customer's place, but you were unable to do the job because the software was forcing you to do a data upload, and worst case, you were not having internet connection at this moment. So therefore, what we implemented is kind of the possibility that you can postpone the data upload for 1 week if you failed to do it previously within the 3 weeks time frame. So that's kind of one of the changes done based on user feedback we got. Then we did as well some bug fixes that were related to the regional settings of the Windows system. So some of the language and regional settings, they were using different decimal symbols to what, for example, the US settings or the Swiss settings are using. And those did face some of a couple of bugs when the operating system was set to one of these regional settings, so that was fixed as well. And then kind of another change that is important for you as users of the software is I guess you know that a couple of months or maybe about 1.5 years ago, X-Rite did change the daylight filters that are installed on the SPLQC product, and a kind of a result of that change was that the instrument, the intensity of daylight is higher than it was with the old filters. And that's simply because the new filter material or the new recipe of these filters transmits more light than the old style filters, and therefore what is visible in the instruments is that there is a higher intensity on daylight if you are having a newer SPLQC device with new daylight filters, or if you were replacing those with the new filters during the last couple of months. And what we did, of course, along with that is in the new service software, at the beginning of the calibration sequence, there is an additional prompt that asks you if you want to test with old or new daylight filter settings. So the only difference by selecting old or new daylight filters is really the illuminance upper and lower test limits for the daylight lamp source. So if you are unsure if your actual instrument you're going to test is equipped with one or the other, I would recommend that if it's a kind of a device older than about 2018, you can assume that it actually has the old filters. If it's a newer instrument, someone produced in 2019 or newer, then most likely there are the new filters installed. Of course, it can be that somebody changed the old ones with the new ones, but if you're unsure, you can actually calibrate with one or the other setting. And then, of course, a result can be that if you're testing with the old filter setting, but you have new filters installed, you will see that it's going to fail daylight with too much light. So your values will be above the limits. So in that case, you would simply recalibrate daylight with the other daylight filter setting. So that's kind of one of the changes we did to the software. What we did as well is those of you who were using the SPLQC service software before, you know that every time you wanted to start a software, you actually had to connect a Lightspex instrument, otherwise you were unable to start the software. So that's a behavior we changed as well on the new version. So on the new version, you basically require a Lightspex Pro instrument for the license activation. But once you activated the license, and of course the license is still valid for 12 months after you activated the new license key, once the license has been activated, you can start the software without actually having a Lightspex Pro instrument connected. And kind of one of the benefits for you is, of course, that now you are able to look at your database, you are able to reprint certificates, even though your instrument might be with somebody else of your company, and you don't have to wait until the instrument is back so that you can actually reprint a certificate for a customer, as an example. What we did as well, and I'm going to show that right after when we look at the software itself. We did add a couple of LED light sources, the ones that we are officially supporting. And with the new service software, you can actually download those new light sources into the SPLQC device, and then those are available for selection even on the instrument menu by customers. So we, of course, I guess, especially in Southeast Asia, we have customers who are part of the Walmart supply chain, and Walmart actually specified along with us a specific LED tube that is supposed to be installed for their whole supply chain in their SPLQC device. So with that new version, you can actually, one, um, download those additional LED light sources into the device, but then of course you can as well change the configuration of the SPLQC so that it includes that LED light source at the fluorescent lamp position where you have physically installed the LED light source, but of course it allows you as well to recalibrate and recertify an SPLQC device with such a supported LED light source installed. So that's kind of one of the changes as well we did to the new version, and I'm going to show that when we look at the instrument and the software itself. Then there's kind of another change that might be helpful for some of you, and that's kind of that functionality to reset default lamp voltages and lamp power. So what that actually means is we had a couple of users who were running into issues where they tried to recalibrate an SPLQC device, and whenever the software actually did start the warm-up procedure of one of the halogen lamps, so for example, daylight, incandescent A, or horizon, so whenever that warm-up procedure was started by the software, quickly after the SPLQC itself did turn off the light source with a overcurrent message on its instrument display, and that of course can be caused by multiple or can be related to multiple causes. However, one of them is of course that the light source itself, so the halogen light bulbs, may require replacement. But even if these partners or users did replace the bulbs, they were still kind of sticked to that workflow where whenever they wanted to calibrate the SPLQC device, it automatically shut off that light source with the overcurrent message. And the new service software actually allows you to set the lamp voltage for a selected light source back to a default value, and then you should actually be able to go back to that actual light source and recalibrate it without that overcurrent message occurring on the screen. We're going to see how that can be done when we look at the software in just about 5 minutes. Other changes we did is a couple of bug fixes, a couple of changes to the certificate templates. So that were kind of the core changes we did for release 5.9.0. Then kind of the other newer versions, they were just kind of minor updates where we added watermarks for beta testing. Then of course, once we were satisfied, we did a couple of improvements and removed those watermarks. And then on one step, we were actually removing support of the old Lightspex instrument, and just kind of about a week ago we were kind of doing another new release that has a bug fix on some of the test limits for on the certificate issued to customer for Horizon and incandescent A light sources. So before we will look at the software itself, a couple of additional changes that were done to it, and one of them you will notice that it has its name changed. So it's no longer called the SPL4 service software, it's now called the SPLQC service tool, and that's mainly related because the SPL4 was really only kind of a project name but never really the official product name. So we wanted to get the software kind of named exactly as the product is named. Another probably important change for you as well is what we did along with adding the support of the Lightspex Pro instrument to the software. We did merge two different SPLQC service softwares into one. And you might know that in the past we had X-Rite service organization using kind of an X-Rite internal version for SPLQC service, while our partners were using kind of a third-party version. And what we did is we, of course, found it kind of inconvenient to maintain two different versions of the software, but it was as well, of course, always kind of a delay until our partners were seeing changes on their version of the software, because we always kind of did the changes first on our internal version and then only in a second step did make the same changes to the version that was used by partners. So with this merged version, we basically, whenever there is a bug and we fix that, it will not only be fixed for the internal users, but at the same time, because everyone's using the same version, at the same time, whenever we apply either bug fixes or feature updates, everyone, including US service partners, will see those changes at the same time. Yeah, that's kind of the main changes. You still require kind of a company name and a license key to activate the software. The difference for you is that now you're not really paying just for the license itself any longer. So that's kind of included in the lighting toolkit that Sammy Dandison did introduce to you, so that's kind of all included. You still require a MyXWrite account for the data upload reasons, and similar to how it was in the past, that MyXWrite account actually requires some special privileges in order it can work with the software. If you have an account that is not yet working, you can approach me and I can ensure that your personal MyXWrite account gets the right privilege so that you can use it with the SPLQC service software. And that's really our intention, that every user uses an account which uses his personal given and first name, so that basically whenever the user is creating a certificate for a customer, on that certificate it is the actual person's name who was on site with the customer and did the job on site, so that we do not kind of issue certificates where one person was doing the job and the other one is the one reported on the certificate document. So this is now kind of where I will transfer from the PowerPoint slides to the actual service software so that I can quickly talk about these changes, and then I will open up for questions before we will then move to the second service software, the LightView 2 software. So basically this is how the desktop icon looks like once you installed the service software. At the beginning, you simply can select the Lightspex Pro device. You're gonna hit OK, and then you see the main screen of the software, including here at the top the version number. If you wanna start directly with calibrating a connected light booth, process is really the same. So first step is to connect to the Lightspex Pro instrument. So similar to the old Lightspex instrument, you're gonna see the serial number. You see how many days are remaining on the actual calibration of your device. It's gonna take a couple of dark calibration readings, and then the button changes from connect to disconnect. So now you can actually connect to the SPLQC device. You're going to see quickly what is the actual setup of the SPLQC device connected, and then you would actually be able to make two selections. So one is really if you would like to take pre-test readings before the software then actually starts with adjusting the lamp voltages to get the correct color temperature. That's kind of the standard setting, so that we document for the customer how the performance was before we were adjusting the lamp voltages. If you, due to whatever reason, do not want to show pre-test values, maybe because you replaced the main board and there are no previous calibration values for the lamp voltages stored anyways on the new board, then you could actually activate that checkbox, and then it will skip taking these pre-test readings and will directly start to adjust lamp voltages and will only record the performance after the lamp voltages were set and the light sources were calibrated. So that's kind of one of the settings. The other one is the one here. So I think you're used to that one. So here you can really decide with daylight center only. We are just taking readings right in the center of the booth. If you're interested in seeing the performance on the left-hand side below the left daylight filter kit, and then on the right hand side as well, you could actually deactivate that checkbox, and that will ask you to take two additional readings, one on the left and one on the right hand side for the daylight light sources. So once you did that, you simply click on start, and this is kind of one of the new prompts I was mentioning. So here, this is where you select if your instrument is installed with new or old daylight filters. As I said, if you have any device that is older than 2019 or so, Typically, you would select the old filters here. If you have a newer device, then you would typically select new filters. As I said, if you're unsure, you go with the option you believe fits best to the instrument. Worst case, you would actually have to recalibrate daylight afterwards and make the setting to the other setting than what you were using at your first attempt. So that's kind of the procedure here with the additional prompt. What we did as well change is really on that configure SPLQC piece. So remember, this is really where you can change the setup of the light sources as an example. And of course, mine doesn't really have 3 times cool white here. So this is just kind of the default prompt. But as soon as you click on load configuration, it's going to connect to the SPLQC device and it will show you the configuration on your actual connected instrument. So now you can see the instrument serial number and the fluorescent lamp setup. So basically, as I was mentioning before, you probably on old instruments, you will not have any LED light source available for selection directly on the instrument screen. And that is really because the available light sources are not really stored in the firmware. So these are really configured at the factory with a factory service, with a factory SPLQC software, or they can get configured with the SPLQC service software. And basically, whenever you hit that configure SPLQC button, this is going to download the light sources available in your actual SPLQC service software. So basically, if I look at the drop-down menus here, so these are basically all the light sources that I'm going to download to this connected device if I hit that configure SPLQC button. So just ensure that you first load it so that you have your current setup. But then if you would click on configure SPLQC, I will download at this moment these available light sources for all the 3 fluorescent lamp positions, and that will give the customer later on this instrument the option to select one of these light sources directly on the actual instrument. Now, of course, if you are doing an upgrade of the instrument and, for example, replace the U30 light source with the Walmart LED 940 LED light source, then of course you can already make the change here in the drop down and load that configuration to the SPLQC, and then it will automatically expect a 4000 Kelvin LED light source to be installed, and during the certification procedure it will test against those limits. So that's kind of important for you. So if the customer, for example, buys a retrofit kit of these Walmart LED light sources, he installs them on his device. So there is an installation instruction, but on all the SPLQC devices, the customer cannot change the name of the light source from whatever it was to L940. So that can only really be done if the instrument was produced recently, or if somebody with the service software was downloading the full list of new light sources to the instrument by connecting it, loading the configuration first, and then configuring the SPLQC with these additional light sources. So that's kind of that additional feature. And then I'm coming to the last one I would like to talk about, and that is really if you're going to control SPLQC, this is where, in case you are in that situation where the instrument always turns off one of the halogen light sources during the calibration sequence with an overcurrent message, this is really where you could go to that specific light source. So let's say it would happen on this instrument on the daylight light source. So you would actually go to daylight lamp voltage for correct CCT. So if you're actually selecting that and click on get value, you're gonna see the lamp voltage that is currently configured on that connected instrument, and that's what's applied when somebody presses the D60 at the D50 button on that instrument, or that's what's used at the beginning of the calibration sequence for daylight. Now, of course, it can be that this is way higher, and it's on 108 here because I already did during a previous training demonstrate how to reset it to default. So basically really select the light source and the lamp voltage for correct CCT. You would like to reset back to default, and then you simply hit the reset to default button. Now you see that the lamp voltage was set to the default value of 108. And with get value, you can always kind of see what is currently configured for that light source. You can do the same for the other halogen light sources. So for example, for incandescent A, we have a different default value of 110. And then, of course, you can do that as well for the horizon light source, where we use a different default value. Now, of course, by doing this and resetting it to default, you are actually changing the color temperature of that light source, right? Because you changed the lamp voltage. So of course, whenever you do that, you should actually go back to the calibrate SPLQC tab, and then you should actually select those light sources where you did set the lamp voltage back to default in order these light sources perform as good as expected in terms of color temperature. So that were really kind of the changes we did to the software. Having said that, so right after the training, I'm going to share with you in an email your license keys for the new version, as well as some details on where you can download the software from. And then, yeah, you should basically be all set along with your Lightspex Pro instrument and the new version of the software to work on customer-facing jobs of SPLQC. So I would like to pause here quickly just in case you have any questions. Otherwise, we would then move onwards to the second software you're probably less familiar with. So any questions at this moment?
Hello, Damien.
Yeah,
Damien.
hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. It's mean now the new software is cannot operate because you will send the activation code, the new activation code to us again.
It depends. So if you are having a license key for the old version that is still unexpired, you can use the same key. As long as, of course, that one expired, then you need a new key, but it's not like kind of requiring a different key. So if you are having one that is still unexpired or only expires in a couple of weeks, you can still use that one before you use the new one I'm going to send you.
Okay, because today I installed the new version and I use the latest license key, but it cannot activate license. That I don't sure what is the problem. Okay, but I will to check the license first.
Yeah, you can check that, but theoretically, so it should not require a new key because we are using the same method of license activation, and we did not really change anything on that one. So basically, if you have one that has not expired yet, that one should actually work as well on the new version. But of course, what you need to do is you need to have the Lightspex Pro instrument connected, and you need to connect with the software first to the instrument before you can actually activate the license.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So any other questions on the SPLQC service software or what you heard before? Otherwise, we would move to the second software.
Damien, it's Herman
Y-
here.
Yeah, hi Herman.
Yeah, I just curious. You're talking about the SPL QC. How about the Jobs tool, the Jobs QC?
That is really the second service software I'm just going to demonstrate now. And
Okay.
with that software, you will be able to certify the SPL3 as an example, the SPL2, but as well the Judge 2, Judge QC, and the Pantone 3 and Pantone 5 instruments.
Okay, that's good. Just,
Okay.
yeah, thanks.
Any other questions on the SPL QC service software? Otherwise, we will move onwards to LightView 2, which is exactly that software for those instruments. Okay, great. So let's go quickly back to the PowerPoints. So as I mentioned, the second software you get along with the toolkit or as part of the toolkit is the LightView 2 software. Basically, changes we did on that one, and I'm actually not sure who from you did use the old version of LightView before. However, for those of you who were using it, of course, changes we did is the support, adding support of the Lightspex Pro instrument. We did rework kind of the user interface of the old version. We did now require everyone who wants to work with the software to provide or to enter a username we provide as well as a password. So that's kind of a new requirement. And with that username is actually then pulled on the certificate you are issuing to customers afterwards. So kind of similar to the SPLQC service software, we really want that every user of your company who potentially does certify an SPL3, a Judge QC, whatever, for a customer has his own name. You can approach me. You already provided me as part of one of the email exchanges we had during the past couple of days. You already provided me users, so I will actually create those user accounts and I will share the username and password with every single user. If you find that you will have additional service people in your company later on, simply approach me. I can create new users. You don't have to pay for these additional users. So it's really in our and in our customers' interest that whoever uses the software, the user uses his own name, because then that's, as I said as well on the SPLQC software, that is the name that's printing on the certificate issued to customers. What the software does in difference to the SPLQC software, it does not require an activation key, but what it has a hard-coded expiration date, and we basically provide an updated version of the software every calendar year. Initially, that was always happening at the end of a calendar year. Of course, I never found this convenient because that is exactly when we are on the Christmas and New Year vacation. So on the new version, we actually changed that expiration to beginning of February. So that gives us and yourself as well more time during January to transition to the new version of the software. So what you get now is the 2021 version of LightView 2. Someone in January next year, you're gonna get provided a download link for the 2022 version of the software. You will not require any license key to activate. As I said, you would then simply install the new version and you can continue to use the username and password you will be receiving from me kind of right after this training here. So now talked enough about the new version. I would like to demonstrate now on my computer here. I have a Pantone 5 instrument next to me, so I would like to kind of guide you through the process on how can you make settings in the instrument that are required, and then of course how you can actually recertify one of the instruments supported with the LightView 2 software. So basically once you have it installed, this is how it looks like. what we recommend you, and that's kind of important, is that you should, if ever possible, kind of run it in the administrator mode, because otherwise it probably doesn't have the required rights to store the data, and it will probably prompt you with some error messages during its use. So whenever possible, run it as an administrator. So I did set it up in a way that this is done automatically here. Of course, you can do that if you're going to preferences, advanced, and if you want to, you can set that flag here in advanced priorities so that you don't have to manually run it as an administrator every time you double click the software. So then basically, once you double click that software, you're going to see a first prompt, and this is where you need to enter your username. So that's the one I'm going to send every single user after this training. You're going to see a second prompt, and this is where you have to enter your password. So I'm going to do that on my setup here. And once you enter username and password, this is the main screen you're going to see of the software. Before we will see how we can calibrate the Pantone 5 instrument that is next with me, I would like to kind of guide you a little bit through the user interface so that you have a better understanding of the software itself, and then of course show you how you can change settings in the software, as well as how you then go through the procedure of recertifying a light booth. So basically here on the main screen, what you are always seeing is kind of the last test record you were creating with the software. So basically you're going to see the performance of the different light sources of the booth you tested the last time. What it does as well is it selects the last record you created. So we are on record number 15, which is the last one I created during a training of a Latin American partner yesterday. So that's kind of how you can select different tests you did for customers. There is another option, and of course, I mean, if you were using the software for quite some time, right, your list gets long and you probably have more than a couple of hundred records. So it's probably not convenient to guide through that list here on that screen. So the other option you have is you can click on that directory menu button, and that's gonna open up a different window, and in that window you can actually search for serial numbers. You can set a start and an end date to find your previous records, or you can empty these out and search for a customer name, or even search for a specific booths only. You can as well, if you notice that you did a record that is actually unusable and no longer required, of course you can select that record and you can delete it from your actual database. You can then as well, of course, if you want to print the certificate, you can do it from here, or you can actually select the record directly in the main screen and hit that print certificate button. What you can do as well is, let's say you notice after you created the record, as I did yesterday, so now you would probably notice that you did some spelling error on the customer name and address. So whenever you switch here, that's gonna change the information you entered. And of course, on my case here, I always have kind of our address here because these are booths from my side, right? But if you would have done this for customers, you would see the different customer names when you navigate through your record. And if you would notice that yesterday you did a spelling error on that name, what you can actually do is you can select the record you want to change. You do your changes on the company name. Let's say that was probably wrong and should say like this. So you're gonna edit it directly in the main screen here for the selected record, and then you simply click on edit record, and that will update your record in your database. Same for the booth serial number. So in difference to the SPL QC service software, you have to tell LightView 2 the full booth serial number, and that's simply because there is no USB connection to those instruments. So therefore you manually enter the booth serial number here. If you notice that on this record you did yesterday as an example, you made typing errors, same here, you can actually edit directly in the main screen, and then with edit record you can update it and store it in your local database. Other changes you can do is there is a P and F here. So what that actually means is that's the differentiation between a record that was created as a pre-test or a record that was created and stored as a final test. So basically once you went through the whole test of an instrument, you either save the record as a pre-test or as a final test. Now, of course, it can happen that you made a mistake. This is where you then would select the record you would like to change. This is where you would then change it from pre-test to final test if that was indeed not really the pre but the final test. And then you can simply click on that edit record button, and that will change that little P here into an F for a final test. So that's kind of how you can update records. Another important feature is the upload data here. So that is really required every 3 weeks to upload your database to the X-Rite server. You can actually see when that was last done. Here you can see how many records have not been uploaded. So in my case, I did just earlier or basically yesterday upload the test records, and that's why you see that it was last updated yesterday, and I don't have any unarchived records. On that software here, you have to do this every 3 weeks. If you fail to do so, you really have to do that data upload before you can actually take new readings with the software. So quite important that you do that as kind of a preparation for any on-site service you're planning. So then what the software will walk you through when you first install it on your computer, you're gonna have to go through a couple of prompts where you enter your service partner details. You can edit them as well directly here in the main screen, and that is really what is printed on the certificates you are going to issue to customers. A user ID is basically what you are using when you start the software, so that's the username you are using, and then there's a couple of settings you can make, and that's kind of the FC here, that stands for foot candles. So if you would like to see lux values instead, you can go to settings, and in radiometric units you can set that to lux. You can see that it changed here. It did not change here. So basically to get it changed here, you really have to click on File, Exit, and then you restart the software. And then the table definitions change from foot candle to lux. Not sure if somebody, no, all good. So that's kind of changes you can make. There is other settings in the software, so you can select a printer you would like to use for certificate printing. So basically here at the top you see which printer you selected. So I currently selected a Microsoft Print to PDF printer, so that it doesn't really print on a physical printer, but asks me to enter a name and then creates a PDF version of the certificate. If you would like to use another printer, simply click here, select printer. That opens up that new dialog, and then I could, for example, select my network printer. You can see that it changed here, and if I would click on print certificate, it would now directly print on the network printer I have selected here. Other changes you can make is you can change the starting record. So basically here you can see that it is set to 1 on my installation. So that means the list here in the main screen always starts with record number 1. If you have hundreds of records, you'll probably find it more convenient that it starts on your record number, let's say 200. Then you could actually change that here, and next time you start the software, it will no longer start at record number 1, but at the record you selected. There's a couple of that RS-232 port that is really no longer required, so that's a leftover from the old Lightspex. Another feature we have you can change here is the measurement average. So basically we currently, and that what we ask you to leave on 10 for the time being, so that is really kind of our default setting for the moment. We left that open in case we believe, or in case we would notice in future that a different setting would be better. However, the way we are currently working with the software is we are taking 10 readings with the Lightspex Pro instrument, and on the certificates and on our test records here, we are putting the average of those 10 readings. Now you would probably think that it's going to take quite some time to take these 10 readings, but in fact you hardly ever notice that it's going to take 10 readings, because the instrument really takes those that fast that you will not even notice. But leave that to 10. We would tell you in case you should change that to something different. That's kind of the main features for you to change, to customize it for your personal needs. And then really how you certify an instrument is quite simple with that software. So I'm trying to share my webcam I have here. Let me see if, so you should now see the Pantone 5 instrument next to me. The way you are going to certify such a booth is really that you connect your Lightspex Pro instrument first. Once it's connected, you should, at the rear end, you should see a little blue LED, so that shows you that the instrument is powered by the USB connection. Then of course, kind of as a next step, you're gonna have to remove that dark calibrate, or basically that protection cover. So as I said, that's no longer required for some sort of dark calibration. That's really just a protective cover of the diffuser head. And then of course you're going to position it right in the center of the booth. Of course, you're gonna have to turn on the first light source. So in my case of this Pantone 5, that is daylight. Of course, you should now give the daylight lamp a little time to warm up. So we have noticed, especially on the Pantone 5, Pantone 3, and on the Judge QC product, that daylight really takes some time until it arrives at a stable condition. So, and if I stay some time, we're talking about at least 5 to 10 minutes. It is way faster on the other light sources though. So basically, your first step, if you would like to certify this product for a customer, connect your Lightspex Pro, position it in the center of the booth, ensure the first light source is warming up, and then you would start your software. You would go to booth type and you select the booth you would like to certify. You're going to enter the current ambient temperature. You can leave that on a default value if you want to. We as X-Rite, we actually have to enter that manually as part of our ISO 17025 accreditation. If you're not accredited, still kind of recommend to capture it with a thermometer and enter it here, but it's not doing any compensation to the readings you take. So this is really just for traceability reasons. So you enter that, and as a consequence, it's going to wipe out and give you an empty table here. You can see the device type you selected, and now it's still covers or still contains the serial number you were entering for your last record. So if that's no longer correct, of course you have to change that to your actual customer device. You of course need to check the customer address details, because that's what we are storing as part of that record. Of course, probably validate that your address details are correct, but then it's really as simple as hitting that Measure Lightspex Pro button, and that's gonna take a reading. And the reading we're gonna see here, this is really an average of 10 readings per the setting we have here. What we do is we basically take 2 readings, so kind of 2 times an average of 10, and that gives us 2 times a reading. So we have LOX and CCT. MI visible and MI UV are basically recorded here, but not really stated on the certificate. So we will probably do this at a later stage, but we are not really at the point where we are ready to document these for the customers. So that's kind of helping us now to collect data and kind of come up with some test limits for those later on. So what you see is you have a green area here and a gray one. So that's basically the average of the first 10 readings, and that's the average of the second 10 readings. As long as the background is green, that means that the value is within the specified limits. Don't worry about the color. So that's just to separate the first reading from the second one. And then you have basically the average of both readings. So that's the average between these 2 LOX values. And then you have the average on color temperature. So that is really the value that's going to print on the certificate. Now you probably ask yourself, why are we taking 2 times 10 averaged readings? And that is really mainly related because you can use that software for an SPL3 or an SPL2 instrument, and of course there it is interesting for customers to understand, and as well for you to understand the performance below the left-hand daylight lamp and filters and below the ones on the right-hand side. And that's kind of why we take 2 readings. So we hit that button twice, because on an SPL device we would take the first reading on the left and then the second reading on the right for daylight. That doesn't really make sense on my Pantone booth here, because that one has kind of tube-sized or tube-style daylight lamps, and therefore it doesn't really matter much if we take that on the left or on the right, but of course you could still do that. Basically, so that's our first reading. If you did an error here, you could simply double-click that D65, and then it will ask you if you would like to delete the previous D65 readings, and you could start again on daylight. So basically what I'm doing here is now switching to store 1, so the next lamp in the sequence. So now I should wait as well approximately 1 or 2 minutes to give that light source some time to stabilize and warm up. And then it's as simple as clicking again once to take our first reading, and then a second time to take the second reading. And then we can actually move onwards with the next light source in the sequence. So that is store 2. What you've seen is that it was actually replacing the branding store 1 with the actual light source installed. So there is a method in the software that understands detects based on the readings we take, which is the light source installed, and then it's gonna change the branding of the lamp position here to whatever the one is installed on that actual light booth. So kind of the second last light source done. Now we're gonna turn on the home position. We give it a little time to warm up, and then we are taking our 2 readings on the home position. So basically, first one here, second one. So if you're asking yourself what that balance means here, so that is really the how well balanced the light source is, and that's really only kind of interesting for SPL devices and daylight, where you would then see what's the balance between the left side and the right side of the booth. And that really depends on the two readings you took on the same light source. And of course, since we have almost identical values here, that is 100% on that light source here. So once you took all the readings on that light source, ensure that the booth serial number is correct, ensure that the customer address is correct, and then you have to decide if this was your pre-test. So you probably would now do some cleaning work and probably replacement of the bulbs. Then you would actually store this as a pre-test. If you did or if the customer is not concerned about that, you could directly save as a final test. You can see that it now created a new record number 16 in my database. And this is really kind of the whole procedure to certify such a light booth. So now, of course, I can hit that button print certificate. Because I was selecting a PDF printer, I can now give it a name. I'm gonna call this test number 2. So it gives me the message that it completed. And now if I would go to my desktop where I stored that file here, and if I open that file, so this is really the certificate that was created as part of the measurements I took. So it will show the device type and the serial number you manually entered. It will show the date when you did the calibration. Of course, the calibration due date is kind of a year from now. It will show the customer address details you added. It will show the performance, of course, with the pass-fail criteria, the details of the Lightspex Pro instrument you were using. And then here at the bottom, it shows when the certificate was issued, who was the person doing the job, so that's the actual user of the software, username used to start the software, and then that is really what you specified as your company name, and you're gonna see that as well along with your address details at the bottom of the certificate. So that's kind of the second page here, which is the final test. If you would have done and saved pre-test readings first, then the first page would actually be your pre-test readings. So maybe what I forgot to tell before is what we would really ask you is, whenever you are done, whenever you would like to leave the software, do not use this cross here to close the software. We recommend you should always go to File, Exit, because that way you would get a warning message if there is unsafe data. If you are using the cross symbol at the top right corner, the software would immediately close, and you would not get a warning message that will tell you that there is unsafe data and give you the option to save. But that's kind of the whole procedure with the software. Would like to pause here and ask if there is anything unclear to you. Otherwise, we would kind of complete the training now, and I would send everyone his personal username and password, as well as the details how to install and download both of the software versions. But yeah, let's quickly see whether there are any questions before we can close the training.
Damien.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Herman again. Can we have your video with regard this training to send to us so we can maybe what we forgot we can review back?
Yeah, it's now the problem is I should have actually recorded it at the beginning. um, but what I can definitely do is it's most likely not the last training we do on a topic. So if you're interested in, I can definitely record the next training session and I can share it with everyone.
Yeah, I think this is very helpful letter.
Okay,
Thanks,
okay.
Clement.
And maybe if we're talking about training, right? So what we are really trying to do over the next couple of months is kind of, create training videos for several topics. And it will definitely be one where we talk about the LightView 2 software and how to recertify these light booths. So we are kind of working on some sort of virtual training for our partners, and you will get some more details on this during probably towards the end of the year with kind of a first set of virtual trainings your team can attend online.
Okay.
Because of course we learned during the last 1.5 years, right, with that whole COVID situation, that it is definitely beneficial not only for us but as well for all the partners if we can actually provide some sort of training as well virtual without any traveling, and that's kind of what we are working on in the next couple of months.
Yeah, that is perfect for us.
Okay, so any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I would send all of you your personal account details.
Hello, Damian.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, Hemat speaking here.
Yeah. Hi, Hemat.
Yeah. Is there any warning message in new Lightspex Pro if about the expiring date? Because like if refuse instrument there's expiring maybe before expire 1 month there's a warning message.
Well, what you are seeing in the SPLQC service software is when you start the software. Let me do that quickly. And you connect to the device.
Mm-hmm.
You can see how many days are remaining.
Okay, so that means it's also available in the new instrument.
Exactly. So that
Okay.
should actually match with the expiration label on the instrument itself. And I'm not 100% sure. Let me see quickly. I'm not sure if you would see that here as well. So in LightView, you basically just see when it was calibrated, but of course you know that it's gonna expire a year after that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Of course, I mean, as I said, I'm gonna share with you your, the option or the links to download the software, your usernames, passwords, and license keys. Of course, if you start facing issues or if you have questions when you start using it, of course, you can always reach out to me. I can as well, if you're interested in, join another training. I'm not sure how many partners still left to get trained, but yeah, you can always tell me, and of course, I can put you on the list for invitations of the next training. We don't know when it is because, of course, we now kind of collected everyone who recently received the instrument, but most likely there will be another session for the next group of partners. So if there are no other questions, then I would like to say thanks to all of you for attending. I hope you learned what you intended to learn during today's training. and as I said, you're gonna get emails from me with your usernames and passwords, and then of course ask you to download the software, install it, and then if you're having a booth in your office, really recommend that you make yourself familiar with both softwares, go through the full procedure with an instrument so that you are familiar with the process. You can ask any questions if you have some before you then actually kind of use the new solution first time on site with customers. So thank you very much to all of you. Thanks, especially especially everyone attending on a public vacation. So I don't want to steal more of your time, and I want to give you back some time, and hope you guys can enjoy the rest of your vacation day and enjoy your evening.
You too, Damien. Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Damien. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Damien.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.